abuse is the most underrated abuse. We don't talk about it often because they are so quiet, because their abusers are often their caregivers. So the people that they will most likely be able to vent to are the ones that abuse them. And normally the only person that they can talk to would be a doctor, who they would rarely see. And 9 times out of 10, if their mental capacity is not 100% there, aren't believed. Or if they're at a nursing home, sometimes the caregivers at the nursing homes, which may also be abusing them, won't pay them any mind, and their family may rarely visit them, so they're not often taken seriously. And so they can sit there and suffer in silence for so long while they're being abused. And so few people will actually go and visit them. So they sit there and suffer in silence. And it can go on for years and years and years. And we saw it in Florida when they had the hurricane to hit there, and we had, dozens and dozens of those elderly people sitting there suffering. And they're just suffering. Family is not there because of the hurricane, and it took one caregiver obviously there to say something, but even then, it took days before something was done. And again, the flag goes up to where we have so many that suffer in silence, unfortunately, and elderly are one of those ones that, again, the abuse is prevalent, but unfortunately they suffer in silence. The signs for elderly abuse, the first point I want to mention, I want to say I understand, as one that was a grandchild of someone that I took care of for years that suffered from vascular dementia, congestive heart failure, ultimately Alzheimer's. I understand the struggle. I understand how strenuous it can be emotionally, mentally, and physically. I want to say that first, because a lot of times, if you have not had to take care of one intimately, it's hard to understand how difficult it can be. However, for those that aren't taking care of them daily, whether they're in a nursing home or whether you have them having someone come to the house, you cannot not go visit on a consistent basis. You have to be very diligent in going to see how their hygiene is being kept, which is the first thing. Hygiene is normally your first sign whether or not they're being kept right. You know what smell is all about. You know whether their hair, and I say it, we may think that it's not simple, but it's simple. Is their hair being maintained? Do you see them in the same clothes? Do you see that the food, even checking their food logs? Have you checked to see if their bedding has been changed? They keep logs of when bedding has been changed. Are you checking to see if there's any bruising? You can actually ask if there's a difference between, because sometimes obviously the older you get, the way the blood pockets and settles obviously can look like bruising, but you can actually inquire and have them let you know, is that bruising from that, or is it bruising from how they're managing you? Based on their mental capacity, are you asking them to tell you the story? Because sometimes, it could be that they're telling you a story, but then there's sometimes you can notice a difference in the tone of their voice. You can ask those questions. It's okay to ask those questions. When's the last time that they've actually been with a physician and not just the doctor at the nursing home, if they're at a nursing home? Again, consistency and actually going to check on your loved one is key, and it's worth your time. Yes, you may be tired. Yes, I understand it's emotionally stressful, but they're not always crying wolf. And that's why it's so important for you to take the time to see what's going on with your loved one. And I stress the fact that hygiene is normally the #1 key that you can tell whether or not that they're just being managed and given that quality time. And also being able to check the records for the establishment that you've placed them in. They actually have to be kept with licensings with the state, whatever state that they're in. So you're able to actually, it's public record, you're actually able to check when's the last time that they've had licensing for that establishment. You can check and see if there's been deficiencies, if they've been had their license suspended for any reason, you're able to check and keep up with those things. If you're paying your money for an establishment where your loved one is, or if they're keeping, their pension or however it's being paid, you should do your due diligence in making sure that that establishment is well kept and up to date, and making sure that their licensing is in point. So again, I just think the time that you take to do your due diligence for your loved one is definitely well worth it. Now, if it's someone that's staying with a relative, because we do have relatives that get paid to take care of their loved ones. So you may have a larger family and you have a brother or sister, or aunt, uncle, or whatever have you, taking care of your loved one. You need to do due diligence as well, because sometimes relatives will take advantage of the fact that they're taking care of a loved one and they just get a check. We've seen that happen as well, to where they just letting Aunt Sue or Grandma and them lay up in the bed, and I take the same key factors and you apply it to the same relative that's at the house. You want to keep your relatives accountable for taking care of your relative. And I always look at it like this. Hopefully, if you had a good relationship with your relative or your parent or whomever you're taking care of, they took care of you. So that same due diligence that they took care of you when you were a child, hopefully you'll apply it to them as well. And if you see some things that are not sufficient, hopefully you can address it with that relative. If you can't, they have reporting agencies in your state that you can report that. They have legal agencies that you can work with that can help you report or hold people accountable for your relative's sake. And it's actually your due diligence and your obligation to do that. And you do have options, especially if you're not the legal guardian, because sometimes that will come into play. Well, I'm not the legal guardian of my relative and I see something happening. You can report. You do have legal options to help you to where you can move forward with certain steps with some legal counsel to make sure that you can move in that direction, so that you do have options.